here's the thing. We walk around not knowing who we are. That's just really the bottom line. People are walking around, have no clue who they are, and every day they're trying to reinvent themselves. And then you have the advertising industry saying, hey, you're going to look great on this. Hey, wear this lipstick, you're going to feel this, blah, blah, blah. So we're always changing, assuming new identities, getting tired of that. Oh, if I only have this, if I only lose 20 pounds, if I only blah, 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 blah. It never ends. And people need to wake up to that, is that it will never end. You just have to stop and realize who you are beyond the facade, beyond the character in this movie, because you're playing a character now. It's not you.
Hello. Hello.
Nice to see you guys. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks very much for, James told me that you kind of reached out to us.
Yes, I'm just, I was fascinated by your channel, and anything that has to do with the truth and spreading the truth, more than ever now in the world we live in today, touched me. I just love what you guys do, and
Wow. That's nice. Thank
you.
We try our best. We try our best. Sometimes it's a little bit, especially the older videos, that like I don't even agree with a lot of the stuff I've said in the past, probably, but I appreciate that. And because we like reach out to a lot of people and get a lot of people on here, and we've been told before, you got to appear on other people's stuff. So on a personal level, I appreciate that you reached out and wanted to talk to us.
Absolutely. Yeah, my channel is still growing. It's a growing channel, and I would say the main reason I do it is just to be able to spread, get more exposure, spread the word, and I think people are gravitating more towards this more than ever now.
Yeah.
And not as a question of curiosity, it's a question of necessity more than ever.
How did this happen? How did the cat get out of the bag? How did the system allow this to happen? It seems so possibly detrimental to it.
No kidding, right? I know exactly what you mean. I think we are truly in a paradigm shift of unprecedented proportions, at least for modern humanity.
What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?
We just gotta sit back, man, and just take it all in.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing, is once you realize who you really are, then you put your trust in life, because once you do that, life takes care of life,
Oh yeah, I like, even with this, like the limited amount of experiences, I guess I'll just call it, I've had, it's not like I don't not do anything anymore. I feel like the not doing it phase often gets confused with like, that's when you're searching, is when you're not doing anything. When you see a guy that's meditating like 24 hours a day, he's searching hard. That's because he can't go to work. You know what I mean? I think it's probably likely that if there was a mass awakening, or that's the people waking up spread, that that people would go back to work. People would contribute and care about things. And
I think so. I think you're spot on, because contrary to popular belief, I think that when we do wake up, we gravitate towards what we're really meant to do versus what we're programmed to believe we should do.
yes.
And as a result of that, we align with our true nature, first and foremost, which then puts us in a state of flow, in a state of receiving, in a state of observing. And I think when you're that consummate observer, and being in that position where nothing really affects you anymore, you can still live life. But the thing is, because you're not so driven by the outcome, you're so much focused on the moment. And that flow becomes so easy in a way, because you can just kind of melt into it, And I wonder if that's something you've experienced as well, is that, like, for example, when I'm speaking with you, there's no more person here. That personal identity has been completely gone for a while now.
Are we recording? I just want to make sure.
Sure.
Because I don't know. Should we do enough? I wanted to spin something off you, because
yes,
a challenge I think that starts to happen is, at least with me, is like recently I actually had I would think I was just doing a bunch of guided meditations with good guided meditation people like Adi Ashanti and Simply Always Awake D'Angelo. I don't know if you know who he is. He's good.
Yeah, I know them both. Yeah.
And something clicked recently. They were like, it's just right there. You're just be aware of awareness itself. And something clicked, and I was like, oh, this changes everything. But one thing I find is that can easily turn into a new ego. It starts constructing into like this. I think it's called a spiritual ego,
Yes.
and I and I find that people come with valid concerns about like spirituality, like about like, well, what the hell, like, you know, like survival baseline, like what you need to do to live concerns. And I was thinking, just as we were talking
Mm.
before we started, I was imagining a movie where there's like a like a zened out enlightened person with like a guy that's lived a really hard challenging survival life. And I'm like, the zen guy probably would be like, I'm just gonna go to sleep and die here, and the hardcore guy might have to save the zened out guy, like, because he's conditioned with toughness that I think it gets sacrificed. Honestly, sometimes if we're going to start atrophying, if we're not going to be so hardcore about like having this egoic desire to be look a certain way and be perceived a certain way, I feel like you could kind of on a physical level get weaker, and you might dip all of a sudden. Like, I mean, that's the reality. We do depend on people that are suffering to be awake. But anyway, I don't know how to start this thing.
No, we're
I
doing
love
good.
no,
Just
I
let
think
it just let it go.
yeah, that's the whole point, man. Is what I love about it is, you know, for example, before we met, I really had no idea what I was gonna say. It's like if anything that happens right now in my life, kind of a segue to what you're saying is, I actually, even though I feel like I'm less in control, I actually have more control. Even though I feel less empowered, I have actually more power. And that's
Right.
because I've given all of what my perceived power away. And one thing that you hit on the beginning, which I love, is, you know, you were listening to Adyashanti, and you kind of went into this space of being aware of awareness. You know?
Yes. That's a good term. That one made something click too. Awareness, becoming aware of awareness, or whatever.
Exactly. And that's essentially what we are the whole time. That's how we're actually born. We're born being aware of awareness, even though cognitively we haven't been given the vocabulary to discern that yet. But the issue begins, and this is kind of when I had I went through several, let's say, awakenings, but my latest big awakening is when this all just clicked, so to speak. And that is, it's so clear to me that we have created a idea of ourselves based on concepts.
Yeah.
We are not a concept. More to that, reality is not a concept, but we've been forced to believe and fed the idea through conditioning, through schooling, through life. You know, you're a boy, this is your age, you're going to go to school, the main anchor in conditioning being my name. And through reinforcement of conditioning, you create a conceptual idea of who you are. And that conceptual idea over life keeps getting bigger and bigger, building like a skyscraper, right? And you're investing more in it. Self-help books, how to win friends and influence people, how to do this, how to do that, blah, 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 blah. And you're building. The problem is your foundation is suspect. The foundation of the building of who you really are, which is just pure conscious awareness, which we've never taught that we are. That's just we assume that we are our concepts. We assume we are a person. What is a person? A person is a bunch of conceptual ideas of, it's a construct. It's an idea I have of who I am.
Yeah.
And the telltale sign that that's not real is that it's always changing. You
Yeah.
weren't born with it. So we were born with no concepts. We had zero concepts. So that's already a sign for us that that's not really natural to us. And then the other thing is whenever thoughts, whenever emotions come to us, it's remarkable how nothing stays. The law of impermanence, Buddha's law of impermanence. So for example, I've met so many people say, oh, I'm so anxious. Okay. At 1 o'clock yesterday, were you anxious? Well, I'm not, I don't really remember. Okay. Well, try to think. No, I don't think I was. Okay. So then you're not anxious.
Yeah.
Everything comes and goes, right? The law
Yeah.
of impermanence.
And
But
conversely, you could be like, hey, your house is on fire, and watch somebody lose their mind and then be like, it isn't. And they're like, oh, you just had a sigh of relief based on nothing. There was a go up and a down based on nothing. Like, one thing I keep relating it to, I'm not sure exactly what the concept of, I think it's in Hinduism, the realm of hungry ghosts. I don't know if I know the literal meaning of that, but I'm like, that's such a good word, hungry ghosts, because some of us get to a point where they're like, why does nothing ever satisfy? Well, every meal just needs to be topped off with a coffee, and I could really go for a little bit of cake, and then a cigarette, and then it's endless pursuit, and it's always driven by hope. Things will be better. Future, I'll get something in the future. And to me, that's like feeding a ghost. It's like literally like putting food in a ghost mouth, and it just, what happens is it drops through the body and falls on the ground, and ghost goes, I'm not satisfied. Because you can't feed it will never be satisfied. It's
Very
just
good,
ideas,
very good point.
right?
The idea we have of who we are is just that, and that idea suffers from its own ideas.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing. When we struggle, that thing called struggle, I'm depressed or is anxious, the minute we start self-inquiry, Ramana Maharshi's self-inquiry, which is one of the big things that did it for me, you know, is when you just have to really find out who is the one who's struggling, who is the one who's suffering. There's just no, the thing about spiritual awakening, even though I was on a path for so many years and I tried everything, I think I just gave up totally. It's just when I finally surrendered that it clicked.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
You know how
Right.
many times I've heard that? But it's interesting when you're talking about spiritual awakening and kind of taking that time, the fertile ground. It seems to be taking time to meditate or just to try to do some self-inquiry here. But like you were talking about kind of how you've had some good experiences lately. I've been, going through some difficult experiences lately where life has been pretty chaotic and I feel kind of pulled and torn away from this type of stuff. And one of the reasons we kind of even do the channel is like, I feel for the type of person out there that is, they would like to be doing better. They'd like to get more spiritually connected, but the chaos and the madness of life is pulling us away. Like, even though it seems like there's so many people that are now turning to spiritual awakening, does it not seem true also at the same time that distraction is like accelerating? So we have like these two things bouncing off of each other now. I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience with that and what you think about the distractions, some of the things maybe we can do to help, say, just a guy like myself or anyone else out there who's watching this.
I love your questions for many reasons. Number one, that was my motivation with this channel as well. I've always wanted to do a channel because I just wanted to help people. I went through personal hell in my own life, especially when I just turned 40. That's almost 10 years ago now. And I don't talk about past events anymore because that person doesn't really exist anymore, if that makes any sense. But long story short, my mom recently passed 5 months ago, and she had a deep interest in non-duality and was very taken by my awakening. And it was starting to really help her because she had a lot of physical pains, and she had double hip surgery and a heart stent replacement and everything. And to my, I was so happy because I was actually helping my mom's suffering. Her mental suffering was getting so much better because now she's not associating or identifying with her pain anymore, which was a beautiful thing. And she says, you need to start a channel. And I said, yeah, Mom, I will. But finally she passed, and I thought now is the time. So I kind of felt, after her passing, this was the time. And it's the same reason for you guys is, I suffered so much unnecessarily in my life until I really woke up and realized who I really was beyond my body, mind identity, that I think so many people out there are suffering unnecessarily.
That's a very moving story too. Sorry.
No, no worries, man. And I think at the end of the day, this whole journey, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but it's been a journey of authenticity. It's like becoming more and more who you are, more and more authentic, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That little me and I'm sure this has happened to you guys where you have like a big opening and then suddenly you go back into the contracted state of the ego, and then you have a big opening and then you go back into contracted state. I mean, it's not and stop. For me, it was like for 10 years like that, man. It was like it's horrible. It's like a pendulum, right?
Yeah.
It's like back
Contraction and retraction. Yeah.
exactly. And then like you were mentioning about things not going so well, or there's a struggle on the outside, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's funny because when that happens to me, I tend to go back towards into spirituality because
Yeah.
sometimes I realize I'm really losing touch with myself. Luckily, it's been a while since that's happened because this is pretty much a permanent state now of just self-realization. There really is no more person that comes. I mean, once in a blue moon, if things get really weird, I might start feeling the person wanting to come out and, but you can like almost smell it. It's like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's the ego
Yeah.
that's there. It wants to pop its head up and say, hey, what's up? It's not allowed, so.
I think I think it's safe to say I have not gotten to the level of awareness that you seem to be at. And I believe you because you're saying all the things that make sense to me already. Like I don't want to give the wrong impression. I'm still subject to suffer if bad enough. Like just because I'm having maybe a good week this week, it's totally possible in the ballpark for me to have a not good week. Um, but it's one of the things that's interesting is with some conscious awareness, like opening up on the inside, and it's I always refer to it as like the volume on the ego being turned down. It's not taking all the attention. It's turned down. Even something like pain, like you were mentioning with your mom, like I've definitely experienced the pain doesn't even have to go anywhere, but it's experienced differently. It's like, oh, it's just seen. One of the words I want to keep using is like non-dramatically. I think that some of the things you've said, and this isn't a criticism from me, but I could see this being thrown out there as a criticism, is like, well, are you sure you're not just disassociating from the pain? Like, are you sure this isn't just a disassociation? But it's not like that from what I've experienced. I'd like to hear what you have to say, but it's more like, no, imagine like more awareness around the pain, but it's not causing you to suffer. And I don't even know if that's graspable with the mind. I don't know if that's something people using their mind, their conception machine, could understand. Maybe you could talk about that.
I love what you're saying, man. You guys, I love your wealth of knowledge and a beautiful dialogue.
Same
I
to you.
there was a point in my life where I realized my mind can only go so far. Like my suffering was so bad, and I tried everything, like one thing led to another, was divorce and blah blah blah. It's just everything kind of collapsed, which was now in retrospect was the best thing that could have happened to me. But I found myself, on my knees, out of moves. Like there was nothing else I could do except take my own life, which I contemplated several times. And that went on for months and years, actually, until it came to a point where it's just, there's just something that's not right here. There's just something that's not right. And immediately with that first shift, it just came to me that everything that I've ever thought about in my life was made up. In other words, it just came to me that I never had an original thought. Like all thoughts we have are conditioned. We were not born with with a single thought. We were not born with a single thought. And thoughts are made out of language. So we were conditioned language. That means that every thought we've ever had, and then thoughts come together to create sentences, which create phrases, which create stories. And we live our life through stories. And it was in that moment that I realized that my entire life was a story that was all made up, and everything else around it was made up. And that had a huge collapse into this moment right now. And there was this huge, expansive, beautiful stillness. That stillness, which you are, which we, there's only one expansive oneness. It's non-material. We take ourselves to be subject and object. We take ourselves to be a subject and object reality. But the fact is, it's only a subjective reality. There's only subject here. I'm having a conversation with myself. You're having a conversation with yourself now.
It's like software bouncing ideas off software.
Exactly right, dude. Perfect. I love that. That's exactly right. So this software, right? This body mind software, which is through belief, our greatest power is our attention. So what I'm saying is everything that I'm mentioning to, from my attention to everything can be observed. When you all are in the ultimate place of pure aware consciousness, where you're just pure consciousness, you just automatically by default become aware of everything, like hypersensitivity. Like as I'm speaking to you guys right now, I see my hands moving.
Yeah.
I feel my mouth moving, but there's no identity here anymore. The identity is totally gone. So if something crappy happens, let's say during the week, where in the past I would be like, oh no, and then stories would come up. The stories is the suffering. We suffer our own stories.
Yeah.
Stories would come up. Why I should have done this, and then who is this I? Who is this I? And that was my second big, let's say, awakening, is the realization that this I never existed, that the I is a complete and total fiction. It's a mind made up concept. Reality is not a concept. And if you, for 1 second, just drop everything, just drop all concepts, and you can always pick them up later, but if you just drop every single concept, drop, 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 drop. This is actually something Adi Ashanti does, which is beautiful. It's like he talks about peeling the onion. You peel the onion, peel the onion, peel the onion, till you get to the center. What's in the center? There's nothing there. So you peel it till you get to nothing, which is who you really are.
Yeah. I that's led me to think of another question, which is what would a society of a bunch of enlightened people look like? Like I'll just throw one example is I feel like it would be there wouldn't be any flattery.
Correct. Yeah, no, I've been into a place. I did a 1 week silent retreat. There was a spiritual teacher who I love called Muji. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
Muji.
yeah.
And one of the people that lives in his ashram, I went to school with him. I studied in Portugal when I was a kid, and Muji lives in Portugal. And so I went to the silent retreat there, and then I went to the ashram, and I spent a day there. And that's pretty much everybody who lives there is pretty much an awakened being, pretty much.
Mm.
And that was an experience, I can tell you, because there's over 100 people there, and you're sitting, eating among all awakened beings. And there's just, the first thing I can tell you is there's tremendous selflessness there because there's no there are no egoic bodies there. So it's just one entire organic structure. And as a result of that, there's a beautiful flow to everything. Have some food, have something to drink. It just naturally flows. And that's the thing I found with myself is my intuition has gone up with steroids. It's unbelievable.
Oh, wow.
Which is beautiful because I don't function anymore through thinking. Like, for example, if I were to ask you guys, name me 5 times in your life where you were the happiest. Like if you think about it, 5 times where you're happiest, right? You have to go to your mind to do that. You have to pull out your concepts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That means that your idea of happiness is purely conceptual.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Well, you're remembering maybe how your body felt or something, like how you felt in that moment a little bit too, Like I thought of like the day I got married, and I thought of my child's birth. Probably because I'm primed to, because those are supposed to be the best times ever.
Yeah,
but that is
exactly
honestly where my mind went to. I didn't think about how I felt, but I think I just assumed that on those days I must have been really elated because I remember having an emotional reaction on those days. But you're right. It's like I just talked myself into validating your point. It's all conceptual. I'm feeling that happiness.
I'm used to the spiritual talk, the lingo that we're all talking here. But I also try to keep in mind that there's people out there who may trip across a video like this and be like, what are you talking about? And then even though I know as much as I do about this stuff, when you're talking about like the idea of like, no, there's no identity there, I can still feel the like, you should be worried about that, like within myself. And I'm sure that there's other people like, what do you mean lose my identity? That's like who I am. My whole life is built around my identity. What are you talking about losing my identity? What could you say to that person who is new to this?
You're talking to a guy who, I'll say about 17 years ago, had extreme anxiety, depression. I was traveling with my now ex-wife. We're still luckily very good friends. And I remember I was in Chicago O'Hare, and she ran out of the bookstore with a book. And she says, you've got to read this. It was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And she says, you need to read this because she read the back, says, this is totally for you. I said, whatever, Eckhart Tolle is this guy, whatever. So I kept it on my bedside, right? And one night it was like really bad, and I just kept it there. And then I opened it up, and then, oh my goodness. And then something started to resonate like big time. What? And then I read, You Are Not Your Mind. I think it's the opening of the 2nd chapter or something. Mm-hmm. Long story short, that's been my Bible. That's what opened up the whole thing for me, was the power. I mean, that was just like God's grace, because that's what started the healing process, honestly. So to answer your question, I have to go back to that period of my life where I was still very associated with my mind. And when I read that you are not your mind, there was a circuit breaker that happened there. There was like a short circuit, man. It was like something like, what? What do you mean I'm not my mind?
Even as a concept, that's very liberating.
Even as a concept, it's extremely liberating. And the thing is, I intellectually understood awakening for many, many years, but there's a huge difference from intellectually getting it and experiencing it as what it is.
Sometimes that's where I feel like I am. I put my hand up. I feel like I'm there. I intellectually understand a lot of the things, and I'm trying to integrate the experience and become aware of it. But it seems to be it's a growing process.
You
I
know,
find that with the non-dual aspect of things, I feel like I'm lopsided in a way where I can get to the awareness part, but the experience of non-duality, like it's everything, like all the stuff I'm looking at is one. I feel like my brain is like a solidly wants to grasp that intellectually, doesn't want to experience it. And I've heard that maybe take that same vast awareness opening and try to direct it towards the heart, and that's how you get into the space of non-dualness.
I love
Maybe you
what
could
you
talk
said.
about that a little bit.
Yeah, because we're talking about techniques now, and I tell you guys, I was the master tech. I tried when I mean I tried everything. I wanted to try every technique. I would be on Google for, I mean, on YouTube for 5 hours, like looking at non-duality techniques, non-duality technique, how to breathe, like put it in your heart, you know. And I tried everything, dude. Yes, there are a few bandages, there are a few little quick fixes, but at the end of the day, what it really took was just unbearable suffering for me. It was to the
Man,
point
I've heard
where
that so many times.
Right, but okay. So let me just jankily try to present something. Like sometimes, as a awakened person, you must see people who are their story has really got their hooks in them. Like their ego story's got their hooks in them, and they act out a drama. They're like acting out a drama as if it's real or something. Like, and it's having physical manifestations. I was just watching a movie where one of the characters in it was so dramatic, and they're like, I'm getting headaches again, and they're leading themselves into traps and struggles, and they're fighting against their own self. And for some people, it's like you want to be like, this is fixable. Like, let's just sit for a bit. We'll get in touch with awareness. And they're like, it's like a wall. It's like, no, I just need the circumstances to change. That's it. I'm not entertaining any other idea. And then I hear about your story, and I think about some of the things I've gone through, which is like you know how I am. I've spent a lot of hours going to the depths, like getting to levels of my psyche that are chaotic, and being just seeing if maybe there's a little bit more I can just. I don't even care if I die. I don't care if I go crazy. I don't care what happens to me. Going as far, and then the conclusion eventually hit, like, one more sacrifice, one more idea is not going to do it. It's like it's an illusion that's the desperate one to begin with. The illusion's the desperate one, And so
I love your story because that's it, man. You're describing it to the T. Is the thing is we are the bottom line is this. We take ourselves to be an illusion. We are not an illusion, but we take ourselves to be a body, mind identity. Very quickly, allow me to dispel that. So first of all, we are not our minds, we are not our emotions or our thoughts, because they come and go the entire time. Like, for example, if you're feeling anxious, it doesn't mean you're anxious 24/7. There's sometimes you're not going to feel anxious. So if we had been the anxiety, when an anxiety is gone, we would also be gone. We wouldn't be here to report about it. So that means we actually witnessed it. So that means we're witnessing our emotions. It's the same thing with thoughts. Like I feel sad. All right, well, am I sad? No, because I witnessed it. Had I been the sadness, that would be gone. Now, it's the same thing with the body. This body was not the same body 10 years ago. It's been witnessed. It's been seen. When I was 5 years old, it was a different body. When a baby is a different body, it's been witnessed. The changes all the time. Same thing with our heart beating. Our heart beating is, we don't have to think about our heart beating. We don't have to think about breathing. Everything happens spontaneously and naturally. And that is the flow state of reality of who you really are. So when you start to understand it, I think, just going back one question, guys, what really helps, at least what helped for me, is there was just too much suffering, but it also was about deconstructing or going back. So in other words, deconstructing the narrative that I had of who I thought I was. So deconditioning, basically. And the way to decondition is to really just be as cutthroat as possible and realize that everything you've ever thought up to this point has been a concept. We are not concepts. Reality is not a concept.
Yeah.
If you remove all of that, if you remove concept, what is left? What is here right now? And the thing is, you can never think about it. And that is the trap I found myself in. I always thought, well, I just got to get in there. I just got to solve this one issue. I just got to, sink my teeth in it, right?
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you can do.
You know what my brain keeps doing now? I keep having these, like, the more peace I have in my day to day, my subconscious is like fighting back. And so my dreams are all me doing really shitty things. Like my dreams are all like constructing scenarios where I like are meant to be like, look at what you did, you bad person, because that's an ego again, right? That's at least a story that the ego can be like, well, it's not perfect, but it's something, as opposed to being like, there's not, I don't need to identify with that. It's like a weird quirk, you know?
We have a power, guys, that came, this wasn't taught to me. I mean, I heard about it, but it's sometimes, you know, unless you experience it yourself, you don't know quite what it is. It's like if somebody wants you to taste an apple, you've never tasted an apple, they can explain to you all day long what an apple tastes like, but you'll never quite know what that apple tastes like until you taste it yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with this, is that it is impossible to explain what this is. This, I mean, reality. Reality meaning you.
Mm-hmm.
Without any boundaries, without any concepts, without any ideas. And it's impossible to think about it. You can just be it. So right now, you are fully awakened. Right now, you are fully enlightened, by the way. I know that's hard to get, but you are.
Even though you can't think about it, like, can you have fun with it and try to point to it using words, talking about what, because some people will call it many things, right? Like some people call it God or source or consciousness. Do you have any terms that is best suited?
I love that question, because when you go to terms, again, you go to concepts. And that's why I try to avoid all concepts at all, even the concept God.
Yeah.
Every human being has a different concept of what God means.
Yeah.
Language, it creates a veil towards reality. The minute we're using language and concepts, we veil reality for what it truly is. If you take a very common word like happiness, well, there's no two people on the entire planet that think about happiness exactly 100% the same way, because we're all conditioned slightly differently. So depending on our mood, depending how we're feeling, we're going to view happiness in a certain way. So therefore, reality as we know it has been completely veiled by our minds. We have never, the vast majority of human beings will be born free, but then they're fully programmed and conditioned. The software is on overdrive, and then they die with the programming, and they've never experienced what reality is.
Yeah, I think it's compounded by the fact that the egoic construct, the mind construct, starts to like wire itself to the body. And so like there's all these labels like bad feeling, good feeling. Like one thing that happens to me sometimes that I get hung up on lately when I'm trying to enter into meditation is I'll have like I was telling James this, I'll have like a tension somewhere, and sometimes it'll be like in the middle of my face. It'll feel like my face is like twisted, and I'll be like, that tension is not going anywhere, and I can't think my way out of it. I can't scratch. I can't move. And then only being like, this is the space in which feelings like this are free to manifest. Like just what's the space this is occurring in? And then peculiarly, like very mysteriously, tension leaves the body. It's stinking bizarre. And then you can even look at it, you know, if tension did come back, you'd be like, you'd see it in a different light. You'd be like, that's not even a problem. It maybe even it kind of feels good. You know, what was a annoying mosquito in my ear a moment ago changes context.
Acceptance versus resistance. That's exactly what you're talking about right
Acceptance versus resistance.
Resistance, because we have a natural tendency to resist.
Right.
And whatever resist persists, like Carl Jung said, right? So
yes.
Anything
it stinking persists. And sometimes I feel like saying, you know, like when I'm like trying to figure out how to like talk about this sort of stuff, sometimes I feel like saying, you know, I want to wrap your brain into a pretzel so that it's like an engine with no oil, so that it just seizes and cracks, and you finally, like, out of necessity, just look everywhere you haven't been looking. Get your mind off of problem solving and just look, you know. Or like, I think the imagery used before is like Zen masters will try to like freeze your mind in an ice block and then smash it, like, you know, because if you're distracted, if you're moving through the world and you're distracted, and you're like a shark in water type thing, it's hard to get still and sensitive to, you know, what's going on inside you, and you might actually be suffering and not even know it. And then what do? You know, do you even bother with somebody like that? Just let them be. But
Very hard. And you guys were talking about distractions before, like if we look at our world today, it seems like everything is being put out there to distract us and take us further away from this moment. It's the same thing with people who are trying to follow the projections in their minds of what they've been conditioned to believe and is going to make them happy. So, for example, the white picket fence, the sports car, the X amount of money job, because they weren't born with that, but that's what they've been programmed. And the more they focus on that, the less they are here right now in this moment. The more they are in the projections of their mind, the more they are in a dream state. Whenever we're thinking, it's like a form of self-hypnosis. Have you guys ever been hypnotized?
yeah, I
I
think hypnosis can, at a certain level, can be of help. Like, if you're still in the realm of self-improvement, I think hypnosis can actually be effective.
Sure. It can certainly help, but it's help for the person.
Right, right.
This is the interesting thing, is
Yeah,
because we're always trying to help the person. The whole self-help world is to help who? Is to help the idea we have of who we are. But the problem with that, it's since it's an idea, it's very ephemeral, it's very fleeting, and it will never be satisfied because it's not permanent.
yeah.
It's always changing. Like people say, you seem like a really stable person. Well, on Friday I was really stressed. So we're always changing. So the problem is trying to satisfy an illusion, like you said, a ghost, very well. We're trying to satisfy a ghost. How is a ghost going to be satisfied? How is an illusion going to be satisfied? It's never going to be satisfied.
And like you were saying, caught up in thoughts, like it can be, you were about to talk about how it's like hypnosis.
It's
Sorry.
the same thing, guys, as if you try to hypnotize yourself. That's the same kind of vibe you get when you're deep lost in thought.
Yeah.
That means you are not present, you're not aware of what's going on, and we're in a dream state.
In a dream
Most of
state.
us live in that dream state 24/7, and we're dreaming about a character that we think we are, that we've been led to believe that we are, who's suffering from its own problems. So it's very divorced from reality. I mean, there was a very dear friend of mine, an awakened being who lives with Muji, and we sometimes say everybody should be walking around in straitjackets because we're all neurotic and insane. Seriously, we all believe we are a person walking around who's separate from this reality. See, that's the crazy thing. When you wake up to that, you see it the reverse. Only one exists. There is no individuals here.
Well, I wanted to ask you, does the world seem loud to you? Does the world, like, when you go out? No,
No,
I don't know. To me, I see, like, because you're pretty mellow. I listen to your talk. I watched quite a bit of your content before we talked, and like you seem very calm and quiet and stuff. And then like you open your front door and you go out into the world, and it's just like cars and horns and people on their phones and yelling and
Yeah. Some people say, "Oh, that person smiled at me. That person grimaced at me."
I was just like, after awakening, does the world see? I just wondered if it felt loud.
You guys have the best questions. I love it. I love it. You really do, guys. You really do. No, that's an excellent question because no, it's a movie theater. Things start to become like a three-dimensional movie. It's like I'm in the movie theater now. Everything is very quiet and it's open, huge, massive space. We're all in it. Everything is that screen. Let's say the screen of a movie. Yeah? All of this noise, everything that's going on, my hands moving like this body, this is all appearing on this three-dimensional screen. It's being observed the whole time. So there's silence that is innate. There is silence that is uncharacteristically innate here all the time. And that silence is who you are. That silence is not objective. It feels like you've probably heard about Nisargadatta Maharaj says the I am that I am, right? That I am is our firstborn. That is it feels personal. Like this present moment, it feels like there is a you. But if you don't give it to your mind, if you just drop your thoughts for a second and you just feel into what's going on here without going into concepts, you know, you just to start to feel that there's just a lot of space here. And it's actually very quiet, it's very peaceful. And
Becomes isness.
yes, yes.
The whole thing becomes isness.
And it already is the whole time. It is isness the whole time, you see. It's just that these passing things like these sounds, it's like in a movie screen. It's just passing because you start once there is no more person, once the psychological person has kind of dissipated, then there's nobody suffering from their own projections anymore. Then it's just energy movements wanting to arise to nobody.
In some ways, it feels like the spiritual walk, you know, like I think a lot of key moments, like you mentioned authenticity, I feel like that's a big part. And I feel like there is something to a spiritual walk. And one of the things you might pick up along the way is tell the truth. You know, if you're coming from somebody that's just a staunch capitalist and you're like, you lie, steal, cheat, do whatever you got to do, it's you against everyone else. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm not being even authentic. Who's talking here? I'm not, I at least want to tell the truth. It seems like there's a path towards this. And I was going somewhere, but I'm going to go a different direction, which is the descriptors of it, like silence or thusness or isness or awakening. And it was like, you can't talk, you know, there's really no way to describe it. There's no way to talk about it. Nevertheless, people talk about it. And I think about the day and age, and it seems like there's more people waking up or having awakening experiences, like in high numbers now. So the talking seems to do something. The journey seems to lead somewhere, you know? Almost like, you know, if that doesn't save you, if you pick up all these spiritual truth, you're like, tell the truth and do all this stuff, and then you're like, it still didn't do it. I'm like the most honest person I know. I'm completely authentic. It still didn't do it. Then it's like, now you're fertile ground for the final step of like, I'm just gonna give it up. I'm just gonna give up everything then and just look.
Yeah. Guys, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head, man. That's really it.
It's like you don't. There's no morality in it. It's not like telling the truth is good because it's good or something. It's more like it almost seems like we got to exhaust certain things before it's possible. You know, it's like you got to exhaust this pursuit before you can really give up.
100%. We've exhausted ourselves individually, and collectively, we've also exhausted ourselves. The world has gone through that caterpillar to butterfly phase. So we're still in the cocoon. We're just starting to get out of that cocoon. And those are the people awakening, not because they want to, but it's out of necessity. There is a natural evolution in the universe. Like there's a natural evolution. Things are always evolving, right? Nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
That's the law of impermanence, right? Things are always moving. Now, we don't know if it moves forward or back. I mean, luckily now science has caught up with spirituality. I mean, if you look at quantum physics and Advaita Vedanta, they pretty much are, you know, and Advaita Vedanta is thousands and thousands of years old, you know?
It's so fun to see the scientists like being like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's like a quantum field of potentiality. It's kind of like a dream. You know what I mean? Like it's funny to see scientists. And I was even at a seminar in Sweden not too long ago, and they were like,
my country.
Oh, cool.
That's where
yeah, my wife was talking at a conference thing there, and the theme of it, so many people were like talking about a gestalt and experiences they had, and they were trying to science it up, and I'm like, how come nobody's talking about like mysticism or like enlightenment? You know, it seems to, they're like, it's just all words, right? Seemingly pointing at the same thing, you know, trying to get at the same thing, which is the most obvious thing in the world, which is like the thing you would never care to look because it seems so basic and obvious. Like, of course, I think, therefore, like, not even I think, therefore I am, like, I am because I am.
Yeah.
Sort of like God's title from the Bible, you know?
Yes, this is like, you know, when a fish is born in water, the only time a fish realizes what water is when you take it out of the water. It's the same thing with us. We're born as conscious awareness. We're consciously aware our entire life. We're conscious awareness the whole time. You can never end that experience necessarily, except when you sleep. And that takes you to another level. We could talk about that for a second, because by the way, we are even before awareness and consciousness. That's even a deeper, let's say, phase, because, and the way you can tell that is when you wake up in the morning, you wake up into something. So that means you were observing yourself before you woke up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's. I don't think I've ever heard that.
No,
but that is a good point.
And that is the Atman Brahman. You know, that is the absolute. That is what we are essentially. But the differentiation between the absolute, meaning that state before awakeness, the state of deep sleep, where there's nothing here, right? And we don't experience deep sleep as anything.
So does memory only exist in the minds of creatures? Like God wouldn't have like a memory then, right?
No, we have no, to pure awareness, this means nothing. This is nothing. There's no, like, my name is Leif, right? But to conscious awareness, this is nothing. Meaning, I'm not trying to denigrate that. I'm not talking about a positive or negative quality. I'm just saying that there
Yeah.
nothing exists here.
Yes.
Just it's happening, and I'm just interpreting it based on based on some kind of conditioning that occurred to this body-mind structure. But this is actually not even a body-mind structure. It's only when I think about it that a body exists. If you don't think about it, there is no body.
So what is it doing? Why are like this may seem like a totally way off their question, but like why are humans being created going through this thing where we gotta kind of like figure out what we actually are, and there's so much confusion and there's this ridiculous reality around us, and the farther we peer out into the galaxy we realize that it just goes forever, and the more we zoom into ourselves we realize that it just goes forever. What like what is happening?
What the hell are we doing?
What's happening?
That's the question, right, guys? That's what started all of this for humanity is like, what is the deal? Why are we here? Like, what's the, and these are the most fascinating questions. The problem is we're never going to find that with our minds. Never. Even Einstein, his greatest discoveries, he did it in what he called the no mind, right? Where your thought just stops and you come to another level where it just comes out of the ether, so to speak, of the ethos, right? And I think the greatest tool we have is focus. Like focus and attention is one of our greatest tools. And we've been focused and attention on our minds our entire lives because that's what society has told us. If you look at, schools, advertise, everything in this, especially in Western society, it's all about using our minds. So obviously, all of the questions, anything that arises, we always give it to the mind. We always give it to the concepts without understanding what our fundamental nature is. We always try to understand what is on the outside, but we've never really understood what is in the inside. And that's been really what's created so much suffering for us, is because we're focused on the wrong thing, actually. We're focused on not who we are, but on who we think we are. And the one who's focused on who we think we are is the one who we actually are. That makes sense.
It's amazing. One thing that's interesting is like there's still variety of people. Like, you could have like a copycat. You could have a guy that's like, I'm gonna make my persona as much like Osho as I possibly can. Like I'm gonna, you know who Osho is, right? Like I'm gonna start talking like this, and I'm not like trying to judge. I'm just saying it's still a persona.
Yes.
But like. And it was pointed out to me in a video or something that like you could have somebody that has a awakening experience or has had it like even a deep awakening, and it doesn't necessarily mean their persona or their mind or their personality is all that developed. Like you could still have them be like, we're still vary in our capacity to do things. Like I can't magically make myself taller, and so my soft hardware is still like going to have an influence on how I'm perceived by the world around me, right?
Absolutely.
But
the personality doesn't change.
Right. But a peculiar thing I think could happen. Like I wonder what some people's enlightenments are like. Like there must be some people. For both of us, it feels gradual, right? Like we've been talking about this stuff and learning things and having insights for years now. But I imagine someone that has like a radical awakening at a conference or something, and they haven't done much, like they haven't been deconstructing their ego, and the ego must be like, what? Like I wonder if there's people that are like, their ego's going crazy inside them, like, what is this? Like I'm not leaving,
No, I've seen what you're describing. When I was on a silent retreat, people were having spontaneous awakenings left and right, but there was one guy in particular who had a scream of terror. It was like a morbid, like, and people were freaked out.
Yeah.
Because he had a total ego dissolution, but like to hinge on what you're saying, there wasn't a deconstruction period. It was like, boom, like total awakening.
Yeah.
Kind of like what happened with Ramana Maharshi.
So that tells me that it is good to talk about this stuff, even if we struggle to talk about it. I think about that. I'm paraphrasing, but that early story of the Buddha, where his disciples were like, "All right, you're enlightened now. Time to go spread the good news." And the Buddha was like, "Those who know already know, and those who don't know aren't gonna change." And his disciples were like, "No, you could say one more thing, and they might change their mind." And he was like, "All right, okay, I'll go evangelize about this or whatever, right? At the behest of his disciples. And so I think there's an aspect of it. I think it is helpful that people are talking about this, even though it's really only a pointing.
Well, I like it because even though, when it comes to spiritual teachers, I see them like a lot of it is repetition. I keep hearing the same packaged a little bit differently. But for someone like me, I appreciate it. I like it because every now and then I feel like someone says something just the right way that it hits you in that moment. Oh, okay, I never thought of it like that before. Or like it unlocks something for you. So I'm glad. So I'd say, yeah, keep doing what you're doing because
and when people have sat in deep awareness for years, they live as a living example too. Like the way they deal with people is interesting, you know? Even if it comes off harsh sometimes, like some person will be like, and this person betrayed me and I'm suffering. And they might say something like, so what? It's a good movie, right? You know what I mean? And then you like, or somebody's pretentious and they're like sort of pretending or something, and then they might challenge them, and then you see an emotional reaction. It's like you're pretty identified with that defensive part of you, you know, that reveals something. You know, they live as an example. Certain teachers. There's a variety out there. There's plain old dudes like us. I love that a lot of the things you're saying, you can guarantee sound like stuff I've said, right?
Oh, yeah.
That, you know, from a selfish, egoic point, it might be like, what the heck? This is uncomfortable. He's saying things I thought I came up with. But with ego out of the picture, you're encouraged because you're like, okay, other people are getting it too, you know? Like, that's cool. You know what I mean? It's interesting that other people are speaking the same language and seem to be getting it.
Absolutely.
You know, there's no need for somebody to be anything. Like none of us are making it out of this thing.
No,
you know, our bodies or
makes it
whatever.
out alive, man. Nobody makes it alive, you know. And that's the thing is when you suddenly just drop into the flow state of who you naturally are, and you just allow things to happen. Things happen better. Things just happen because we are really we are complete and total as we are. We already are totally complete. Nothing
is suffering the breadcrumbs to awakening?
I would say absolutely. I would say for most people it's what has led to, because the fact of the matter is duality is necessary to experience what this is. If there wasn't duality, we wouldn't be able to develop deeper feelings that we have. For example, like empathy, right? I always was kind of empathetic, but never at this level. Like now I'm extremely empathetic. If I see an animal hurting, I will start crying. I mean, this just happened with the awakening. You just become extremely intuitive and very empathetic because everything is you. You take a lot of love for everything, you know? But part of going into these deeper emotional states, you have to have first seen its opposite. So I had to have seen horrible evil. I had to have seen horrible hatred to recognize what its polar opposite is, you know? So by having that dual experience, we recognize our totality. We recognize the good and the bad, but then we also recognize that we are conceiving and creating our own reality. And that is primarily through our thoughts. But the second that your thoughts subside and you see reality for what it really is, it's absolutely miraculous. I mean, it's really incredible. And it's perfect, it's whole, it's complete, it's timeless, and it's what you are.
Here's one. Let's say you don't have time to go meditate for hours and hours and go to retreats. Is it possible for somebody to hear this conversation and go, I'm going to do something. Like after work, I'm going to carve out, I don't know, all I can give it is 5 minutes.
Perfect.
What do you say about somebody that takes 5 minutes to try to become aware of this deep truth? Do they got a chance?
Yeah, absolutely, man, because that was totally me. I had so much ADHD, ADD, I couldn't meditate for the life of me. Forget it. I couldn't sit still. I mean, I was, so it was, as I was mentioning before, it was the suffering that kind of just made me still. That was the suffering. But the thing is, there is a little practice that I can recommend that works a lot for me. And I think we need to be direct. When it comes to spirituality, the less you speak, the better, quite honestly. You just have to get to the point. It just has to be very, very direct because it's already here. Because the more we talk about it, the more we get away from it, It's already whole. It's already here. I mean, you already are awake, right?
Yeah.
But if you do have 5 minutes, to answer your question, go to somewhere quiet, kind of try to desensitize yourself. That's what I used to do because I used to have such a busy mind. I just had to drop everything, like go into a bathroom or go into a room, just close the door and sit down quietly. And I would just drop everything, all the mental noise, all that crap, just drop, drop, drop. And then just sit still, observe everything with detachment, observe with detachment. We have the power to do that. In the beginning, it seems like a struggle. Just observe with detachment, and you're going to have a thought. You want to, and you feel the habit because we are addicted to thinking. It's our biggest addiction, by the way, is thinking. But once you start observing it, that's how you break the habit. So once you start observing that addiction of thinking, you start breaking the habit of wanting to, the mind, we always want to grab, right? So you stop the grabbing, which is a reflex, by the way. It's a habitual reflex because we do it so often that it's just been, programmed into us. And the more you see that, the more you see you have the power of not having to latch onto your thoughts. And when you do that, and you feel like you're present in that moment, start self-inquiry, start finding out who you are. Self-inquiry is the best, in my opinion. Whatever you're feeling, let's say you're feeling anxious. Okay, inquire into that. Who is feeling anxious? Sit completely still and try to find that entity. Try to find that person who's feeling anxious. Look for that person. And this is what I had to do when I have PTSD. I was diagnosed with PTSD after a while. And sometimes it was so bad that I was like, I felt my world was crashing. I had to just drop everything, go to a quiet room, just drop, and say, who is suffering now? Look for the one who's suffering. Like I was really disciplined about that. And I said, and I'm looking and looking. You always get back to the same thing. You always come back to just this, to this presence awareness.
It's like I think about that example you used of the person that freaked out at the thing because they had an ego disillusionment. And I think after some awakening experiences or awakening, however you want to put it, I think that it is more likely that the personality would change because I think that it's a karmic thing. Like I think that we repeat patterns and stuff, right? Like it's possible that somebody would go to carve out, they're like, all I got is 1 minute. And they go in there and they're like, who's talking? And there's a deluge of answers. Like who's asking this? The answer is going to be answers. It's going to be like me. I was born on this road. I have this many siblings. This is my parents. Like you will likely get answers, and you have to almost keep looking as those answers are coming and be like, wait a second, where are these answers occurring in the brain, of course? And then like you have to keep looking through every answer. And even if you are starting to like awareness is growing in you, your body might suddenly like shoot a bunch of anxiety, like panic in you. Like you got to get up now, get up, run out the door, go do some jumping jacks, move. And I think that's like where if you can carve out more than a minute, if you can carve out more time, it's like depriving the ego of responding to all those things. And so it's likely you'll still go through waves of anxiety, but that's like conditioned. It's like how this meat puppet's been being puppeteered the whole time is through. And then you're like, well, what's going on? What's with this anxiety? One of the biggest insights I had is we all went on a family vacation and I like stayed in my room and meditated the whole time, very like selfishly. And I kept noticing the pull to appease the social thing. Like I'm looking like a weirdo here. I got to go out and converse with people. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm conditioned to do that. So all this anxiety, social anxiety I feel has been conditioned into me. Is that even who I am? Like, why do I get to care about all these millions of little things that oftentimes conflict with each other because you can't please everybody? So I think after awakening, when you're not identified, you're not fully immersed in the dream and like living it out and responding to all its cues like impulsively, it goes down. And then the body is like, even though it's irrelevant whether or not the body is having anxiety, it still nevertheless is less likely. Your body doesn't spike up and down as much. Conversely, I don't know, maybe you could speak about this. Conversely, maybe you wouldn't have as elating highs of like, oh, I got a promotion. This means amazing things. I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't enjoy that as much, but at the same time, you wouldn't be devastated if you got fired. Maybe you can speak on that a little bit.
Wow. I haven't thought about these things in a long time, because I used to get my excitement for thinking, like, future events, like if I had a date with a beautiful girl, or I had to go somewhere on vacation, I would think, I would live through my fantasies, or conversely, something that happened in the past, if there was regret. So it's been a long time since I've lived through my mind in that way. This is hard to express, but I find total fulfillment in the moment. I don't really give it to my mind anymore. Like, if, for example, when we met, I put it down in my calendar and then I just forgot about it. Anything that comes up, there is no more thought that goes into. And then people say, what about practical stuff? Practical stuff still happens. In fact, it happens better, because being fully present most of the time, you are there to realize what needs to be done and at what time. And it just happens. This just happens automatically, kind of like your breathing, kind of like your heartbeat, you know? Um, and that flow state is innate. You're gonna flow anyway. It's like the river, Taoism speaks beautifully about the flow of the river. There is a current to life. There's a natural current. So we don't have to put any effort, actually. It will move by itself,
Yeah.
you know? It was
You can't help but even participate. Every breath you take is contributing
exactly.
carbon dioxide or whatever the heck the chemicals are. By your very existence, you're participating in reality.
Yeah.
So
How
true.
about the creative capacity? You spoke a little bit about the practical stuff, but how does it affect your creativity?
Since you have a heightened level of intuition, you become much more adept at knowing what your true gifts are. Like, for example, for me, public speaking is my thing. I work in television. That's what I do as a real job, if you will. Real job. No such thing. But yeah, so I gravitated more so that. And the beautiful thing, guys, is that all the fears dissipate. So all my fears of what I had to do to make money, what I had to do this, and what I was conditioned to believe, if I'm going to fail, blah, blah, blah. So the thing is, I don't spend any more time entertaining that. There are no more stories. The stories are totally gone. There's just this quiet presence that's so fulfilling. It's like home,
Yeah.
It's a beautiful
Always at
feeling.
home, always that
Always at home.
crispy, sparkly, always fresh, always new, always fascinating, always captivating
Yes. Yeah.
every moment. And that does answer that question about dizzying highs and tragic lows. I mentioned earlier, I think a society full of awakened people, you wouldn't hear as much flattery. I think you
There would
also
be
wouldn't
no
hear as
drama.
much, like, you wouldn't also get people being offended as much. There, both sides of it. You wouldn't have people acting with selfish intent the same way they do now, I think.
I agree with you, because it would be more holistic in that way. Here's the thing: we walk around not knowing who we are. That's just really the bottom line. People are walking around, have no clue who they are, and every day they're trying to reinvent themselves. And then you have the advertising industry saying, hey, you're going to look great on this. Hey, wear this lipstick, you're going to feel this, blah blah blah. So we're always changing, assuming new identities, getting tired of that. Oh, if I only have this, if I only lose 20 pounds, if I only it never ends. And people need to wake up to that, is that it will never end. You just have to stop and realize who you are, beyond the facade, beyond the character in this movie, because you're playing a character now. That's not you. And once you
Interesting.
wake up to that, you see that you've never been these characters. You're the screen.
You asked about creativity. Here's a weird one that I wonder what you guys will think of this. I feel like in recent times I've been a pretty artistic, creative, output, expressive person, and lately I feel less like doing that. Like I feel less
Rambunctious or
driven to create things. It's not like necessarily a bad thing. I think about it and I'm like, no, I don't really feel the need. Like a lot of the creativity I've done in the past was probably born out of suffering. Like I need to point at this. I need people to understand. So I create some art or some music. And I think people should know stuff like, I think every now and then it's possible that you'd be like I think about it because I'm like, well, maybe I could use my artistic talents to point towards awakening or something. But it's not like a frantic desire that's going to cause me to stay up all night and hope that I get 1,000, million views on something. It's like, it's more chill than that, for me. I'm assuming that later on down the road that could change.
No, absolutely. I resonate very much with what you're saying, because, you cannot force anybody to wake up. This has to come from themselves.
Yeah.
the beautiful thing about the truth. There's only one truth, the
Right.
truth of who you are, the truth of reality. And all we can do is point to that.
I've heard that awakening finds you.
In a way, you're right. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Because we are already awake in a sense, So the idea you have of who you are doesn't wake up. Like you will never wake up. You wake up from the person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awakening
Yeah.
wakes up, not
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you don't wake up.
And you're like, good riddance.
Absolutely.
The good riddance guy that was afraid of dying.
And you know how we're talking about that pendulum stage, where you go into like you realize you're all everything, and then you go back into the little person, and then you're like this, As you progress down the line, and even though there is no such thing as progress, but just for the sake of this of speaking about it, you start not to like the ego, the person. Like there was a stage where I really, really did not like this person,
Mm-hmm.
And because you start to see, the more you observe, the more subtle your observation, and the more the idiosyncrasies, the more you start to see the shadows where the ego hides and the little things that it does that you don't notice otherwise, that people don't notice when they're like totally asleep.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, here's a kind of a weird question, and does have to do with what you're talking about. Do you find like popular media like annoying? Like I find that there's a lot of like television and TV and stuff like that doesn't. It's hard for me to be interested in it because I see dramatic stories playing out where it's like this could be resolved in 5 seconds if everybody just didn't believe that the appropriate response to certain things is like to be aghast. Like, what are you, some kind of a weirdo? Like, be offended. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's irritating to me, and this is how we emulate that in real life. There's real people walking around like that, and you bump into them. I wonder if it. What is that? Is that like the chirping of cicadas to you now, or are you just like, it's the symphony of the world? Like, I don't.
I like watching movies, man. I mean, I don't get into these two things anymore like that. It's just there's just no more interest because it's seen through. It's seen through as just being very, very robotic and redundant.
Yeah.
Like when I speak to people on the street, there's just repeated messages, like you said, of the media. They're making something out of nothing. We are creating this reality. They're creating something out of nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, and playing it out like a Shakespearean play. And sometimes somebody said something recently that I thought was pretty good too, and it had to do with cutting people slack because it's new to them, Like I think a lot of stuff caters to a younger audience, especially like propaganda. Like, who are we gonna get with this blockbuster war movie to secretly want to enlist in the army? Probably young people with very little experience. And I think there's something to be said about enlightenment experiences that happen naturally without spiritual pursuit, just through experience. Like I've turned every stone over. I know that it hurts to build this identity up and then eventually hit its limits. But when you're young, it's all fresh and new. It feels good to get like a motivated new identity. Like, I'm gonna be a soldier, or I'm gonna be a doctor, or I'm gonna be a this or that. And then you actually got to go do the thing. And for some people, they hit limits regarding that, and they're like, why isn't it working? Why am I not, like I'm a literal hero. Why don't I feel like one, And then sometimes they'll choose spirituality and then put that on like a new personality, and it feels good for a while.
And God forbid they're not given the gifts that society deems as valuable, right? So you'd have the like.
What do you mean?
You got that other side of it, right? You were just talking about a person building themselves up, right? What if there's someone who doesn't feel like they have gifts, so they don't feel like they fit in, right?
Right.
That's another whole,
That might be a shortcut to enlightenment.
Yeah, maybe.
Could be. I mean, I think like, for example, me in school, I hated school. And this was already a telltale sign back then that the programming was not for me.
Right.
Handle the programming. I couldn't handle the conditioning. There was something that was always pushing it away in my life. And the more I got it, the more miserable I became.
Yeah.
So in this experience, it's always been averse to wanting any form of conditioning because it always saw conditioning as a limitation, because concepts are limiting. There's only a certain paradigm, a three-dimensional structure whereby concepts can operate in. And then it's done. I mean, it's a very, 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 very small sliver of what reality is all about. you know.
Yeah, and that's common, I think, to people that find this path and then find awakening, is they'll be like, I was always like in class questioning things, and kind of was like, why are the parents so weird, and why is everybody so neurotic and crazy? That seems common to a certain type of person. And converse, like on the other side of that, you run into somebody somewhere and they'll be struggling with some like superficial issue, and they'll be complaining a little bit, and you might attempt to get them to look a little bit deeper and be like, why do you think that, and what's going on there? And they might give you some circular logic, like because obviously you have to be this. They'll say some obvious thing about society, like, because if you're a man you have to be this way, and that's it. And you ain't getting any deeper. They don't want to know. They just want to, like, it only wants to stay at the level of superficial fix it. You know what I mean?
Amazing, man. I've met a lot of people like that, and it blows my mind what they're missing out, because the
It's
mind is like,
software run amok. It's
yeah,
controlling the whole computer.
right.
And you're like, okay, well, God's in there somewhere, but
So true.
the persona believes it's real. It's like, no, this is as real as it gets. And certain things have to be obvious, because if it really started questioning, it would fall apart. When you get into the realm of introspection and questioning, it starts to it can't be held up, because there's so many contradictions and paradoxes. And
Have you noticed how when we start to want a self-inquiry, how there's almost like something who doesn't want, like almost something wants to stop that. Have you
yes,
ever
Yeah.
noticed that? It's
Oh
like
yeah.
this gravitational force that doesn't want us to see clearly.
yes,
He talked about it, that fear. There's almost like a panic, like the ego panic.
urgency,
Yes.
desperation.
Yeah.
Because once you construct an illusion, the worst thing for an illusion, the death of the illusion is when it's seen through, that it is just an illusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that at the same time is the most damn liberating thing you'll ever experience in your life. When it's really seen through,
Yeah.
like really seen through, like no question, this was a total illusion, that little me.
Yeah.
My goodness, it's like, wow, it's you're showered with grace.
Is it
Really.
all or nothing? Is it all or
I
nothing
was just about to ask that. Like, so
in the sense that
jumping off a cliff.
well, before I had really anything of significance in terms of like seeing through this stuff, I used to struggle to be like I want something, and it's almost like, and the only thing I could do, and then I saw somebody else like illustrate this, so it wasn't even that unique, but I would go like, it's almost like this, and it needs to be more like this. Like, I'm like this, and this needs to happen.
Yeah.
So are there people who are like, I'm losing track here. Can you be on to something? Can you have some awareness? Because you weigh that against somebody who's like they're fully immersed in this thing, and they're even from like a therapeutic psychological level, they're like doing self-destructive behaviors, and they're not even aware of their own actions. They come up to you and go, I'm so sorry that you're a poor loser. He's not poor. He's got more money than me, but like, I'm so like, they're doing things that are passive aggressive. They're behaving in all kinds of unconscious ways. I'm sure my ego does it all the time still, but I'm saying, is, in a nutshell, I guess, is there levels to awareness leading up or down or sideways? Is there levels to this that eventually get to that are in between, that are pre-enlightenment, that are nevertheless more awake than others?
I can only speak from my own experience, obviously. And it certainly felt like that. It certainly did. The first, let's say, couple of levels was just a general disidentification with the thought stream, even though the personality, the ego was still very much there, but there was just a level of greater acute awareness, if you will. And that went on for a couple of years. And that's when I really went into techniques. trying everything from transcendental meditation to different kinds of yoga to different kinds of breathing, you name it, right? And I developed into the ego personality, which is, in my opinion, the worst kind of personality. It's like
The spiritual
the
personality.
spiritual persona, forget it. Oh no, disaster for me.
It's so cringy, and I appreciate the
No,
masters that deal with it with patience, and they're like, all right.
no, it was annoying. Really was. But I say it comes to a point then where the personal identity, it starts to thin out naturally. Like in the beginning, it takes effort, where I would just try to sit, even though I had so much ADHD, it was so hard for me just to sit. But just because of a lot of the life circumstances that were going on, I kind of was forced to sit because I just couldn't take the psychological pain anymore. So I had to just like sit down and just drop it. I just couldn't take it, basically, in my case. And just by dropping everything, it comes to a point where you cannot drop anything else. Whatever you cannot drop is who you fundamentally are. And I would do that all the time until I came to that point where there's just nothing more to drop. And it always is the same. Always that alive, aware, conscious presence. And I think after a while, the person, especially with self-inquiry, the person started to disappear, came to the point where it was just self-evident that there is no more person there. I think when you do it enough and by habit, because thinking is a habit, right? As we discussed before. And the less you are engaged in that habit, the less you are addicted to it, because thinking is addictive. And the more you can take space from thinking, that space between thoughts becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where the space overcomes the thinking, right? So like right now, what is more prevalent, consciousness or thoughts? Well, in order for thoughts to exist, you need to be conscious. But consciousness doesn't need thoughts to exist. So obviously consciousness takes precedence over thoughts, and thoughts appear within consciousness. So that became the MO. That kind of became, it was just replaced. So slowly it's like consciousness finally replaced thoughts, where there's really no more, there's just pure awareness, pure consciousness. Thoughts will come in the surface for practical things, like I have to send this email or I have to do this, but I don't hear really any voices anymore that say, oh, you need to do this, there's just silence. So
Here's maybe a challenging question. Your channel's doing really well, and you're doing a great job. And where are your audience at? Are they how? Because you get right into it. You're like start, and I wish I could be like that. Honestly, I'm like I want to drop this character, this frantic ranting character, and be a different person. But you're measured and you talk about it concisely. Is your audience? Are they like, I came here because I'm already there and I just like here and talk about this? Or your audience reflect like, what the hell? I need more. I don't understand.
I think a lot of them get it. I think a
Yeah.
lot of my audience is already on a new non-dual path,
Yeah.
and as we were talking about before, it's becoming far more ubiquitous. It's becoming so much more popular now. I mean, I know when I grew up, there was nothing about this. I mean, there wasn't even YouTube when I grew up, I was like, if only, And I think more and more people are, I mean, there's so many YouTube channels now dedicated to non-duality, which I love. I think that's wonderful. So I think people are much more well-versed in that than they were before. And there's big names like Muji, Rupert Spira, Cartole that have emerged. So, I think people are just taking it in. That's from the impression I get.
Is there any potential required disclaimers? Like, is there, like, if we're gonna try to like, because I got a kind of a cheeky comment the other day on a video we did where we spoke with someone similar to you, and basically it was kind of their deconstruction out of their religion into spiritual awakening, kind of their journey. And someone left a comment saying, I really enjoyed it. I can't wait for part 2 where you talk about deconstructing spiritual awakening. What could, like, what's your kind of response? I kind of already have an idea of what I think you're going to say about that, but I'd like to hear your response to say a comment like that.
Just very immediately, guys, it just goes back to concepts. If we have an idea of what spiritual awakening is, that's just a conceptual idea. So we could go nonstop forever thinking about concepts of what that is. It's until we realize that we are not a concept and that reality is not a concept. Until we really realize, we could hear that 1,000. I know for me, I had to hear that over and over and over until it's finally like clicked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm sure like with you guys probably can relate with some of Tolle's writings. You know, you hear something, but then 5 years later, you hear the same thing. It's like you hear it in a totally different way. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. The Power of Now, the book that you're
Yeah,
talking about. The first time I
exactly.
listened through it, I was like, "What the hell
Right.
is he talking about?" And
So
then I'm delighted to come back to some of those things later and be like, "Oh, okay."
Exactly. And that's the thing is as we deepen in our spirit, in our understanding of who we are, the message that seemed very simple and mundane now reverberate at a much deeper level with who we are, you know.
I thought for a second you were gonna say something like to the guy that's like, so next deconstruct spiritual whatever awakening, and be like, well, good luck deconstructing nothing.
Yeah.
That's the
You know, like how dare you have a chance? Like you're not selling anything, you're not giving any like, you know, dramatic steps towards anything. It's more like just a kind of discussion about look through this. And I think you have to take, if you're not going to do that, if you're going to like not inquire or question what's going on, you got to kind of just settle on some really shaky things. Like what did the years ago, what's a good one? Like a good Steelman one would be like consciousness only seems like it's happening. But there's no consciousness. It's just a trick of the mind to make it seem like it's happening. And I guess you could be like, yeah, maybe. What does that have to do with, you know, it still wouldn't touch what awakening really is, I think.
correct.
You know?
Because again, these are concepts. You see, the
Right.
thing is, we have been programmed conceptually. And the
Right.
second that really clicks, and my biggest recommendation is just to keep trying, just keep doing self-inquiry, find out who you are, find out who you are, find out who you are. Even though you get to the same place and you will always come back to the same place, keep doing it until it's just so obvious, because it is so obvious that you are just pure aware conscious. It's so obvious there is no person here. It's just so obvious.
I think it's a blessing to have the YouTube content too. Like people, like you can listen to someone like yourself. I like Gangaji. I like Adyashanti. Even Osho, you know what I mean? Even though Osho was a little bit more like wrapped up in just being controversial, like he was really fixated on, I'm going to break your brain. I'm just going to say contradictory things till you realize that, you know, this is philosophy and it's endless. You know what I mean? I'm just going to fill you with paradox. But people like Gangaji and stuff, their demeanor, even if, like you said, if you do the self-inquiry, just keep asking, keep doing that, I think you can also expose yourself to a lot of good teachers, good, gentle teachers, that their words will eventually start to click. You know, you're watching, especially if you're like serious about it. You know, I really want to know, can I have this? Can I be awakened? And you're watching them. I think something gets through with the teachers.
Yes. The key to realize, guys, and I hope all the listeners realize this too, you're already fully awake. We've just been misperceiving our entire lives. We are following an assumption. It's an assumption without really looking into it. Like, so we've been assumed that we are a person. The narrative is that I'm this individual, I'm this age, blah, blah, blah. But have we really looked for that one who believes all of that? And most of us haven't. That's not something we learn in school. Nobody teaches us to find out who we are. We always learned outside things and developing this ego, right? And that's for me would be interesting is in the beginning in school, you know, what if we started like our first class is find out who you are, find out what your true nature is.
We've got it backwards. It's like people's lives end with, and then I retired, and then I kind of started questioning what life is about. Started painting and found spirituality and got enlightened at 75.
You're
You know
absolutely
what I mean?
right.
It's like, what if we did it the other way? What if it started with like, started with consciousness, you know?
That's right. I think that, you know, Krishnamurti,
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's what he was trying to do when he was living in Ojai in California. He's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm not right in saying this, but he inaugurated a school to teach that.
I
So
didn't
the
know
kids,
that.
yeah. So in Ojai, the kids were taught in a much more holistic way, so to speak, in his school.
I'd love to see that, like, you know, just the basics, like let's just try to do some meditation with these kids. I think they do a little bit of that in the early years, but it's more like lay on a mat while I read my book. But
I have one more. Do we have time for at least one more?
Yeah. Sure.
I have one more question for you. What your thoughts are? With certain spiritual teachers, they'll veer off of just strict enlightenment, and it'll get into like, do ghosts exist? Let's talk about astral projection or telepathy, or they get into the supernatural. What are your thoughts on that aspect of things? Like sometimes I'd be like, why is Sadhguru talking about, people that float or something? Like, what does that have to do with this?
Yeah, it's interesting because for the longest time I was very interested in the supernatural. In fact, my mom was really into that kind of stuff, which got me into that. And maybe that was a reason I veered towards spirituality, who knows? But at the end of the day, is once you really realize who you are, you see through all of those things. You see through all of that. That's just part of this one totality of what is. It's all you. It's all phenomenal. Anything, you could have the most amazing experience in your life, the most phenomenal, most incredible experience in your life, but it will also pass. It will also be gone. It's like people who are training their whole lives to run in the Olympics, right? Imagine how much time they dedicate, how many hours they sacrifice their entire lives for that 1 minute where you stand and you get a gold medal. Then that minute is gone, dude. Then it's done. Then what? Now you're living the rest of your life showing video. Oh, in 1994, I won the gold medal. Look, in 19, and that's not life.
I'm going to be at the beach on June 4th.
Right.
And so I have this many months to get washboard abs where I'll have my shirt off for a half an hour where somebody may or may not even acknowledge my rippling abs. It's so hollow.
It's so hollow. So we are creating stories, dude, and we're living these stories. We're living fantasies in our minds. We're living our projections, and then we're suffering from them. That's even worse. So it's unnecessary. So that's really one of the big takeaways from our audiences is suffering is unnecessary. Most suffering is unnecessary.
Pain's going to happen, but the suffering part of it is unnecessary.
Absolutely unnecessary. And it just accentuates it. The thoughts, and especially self-pity is the worst. Like, I feel like that's completely unnecessary, completely fictitious and unnecessary.
Cut yourself a break. Your entire identity is just a byproduct of the Matrix. You don't need to worry about it.
Pretty much is, man.
You didn't give yourself your own personality.
That's it. Yeah.
So what next for your channel? What's coming up?
I am doing a few one-on-ones. I had a beautiful one a couple of days ago where the lady I was speaking to kind of had an awakening on while I was speaking.
Awesome.
I feel like I was watching that.
Very nice.
Did you post a clip of that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was nice to see. And again, like we said in the beginning, you can't force anybody into awakening. They have to just come and it has to be the right time for them. We either, and I know you yourself, guys, you probably have like some moments you feel more drawn to it than others, but when you feel drawn to it, you can absorb it much better. So you're being true to yourself at that time.
Yeah, I like, just as you were speaking there, it makes me think of somebody that's like, I have a little bit of pain, and so I want to investigate this. And upon investigating, the pain becomes big pain, and then the only solution ends up being the solution, which is just the awareness behind all that. You know what I mean? Like I'm suffering a little bit, and enough to start, like, rather than distracting this away, I'm going to do some investigation, and then it becomes a lot more sharp of a pain before it exhausts itself.
That's where not resisting resistance comes in, because we naturally resist stuff.
Yeah.
So if we're sitting still, for example, and we're doing inquiry, we're automatically, all suffering comes from resistance, and most of it is subconscious. It's a contraction in the body, and it's the halt of our breathing. But we resist resistance.
Yeah.
So the key is not to resist resistance. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. No, 100%. I was literally thinking of a point in my own life where that was happening, and I was trying to resist it.
Yes.
It's like I was literally doing that like yesterday, I think.
Beautiful. Then when you remember, consciously remember, don't resist resistance, then you're immediately, you surrender, because it's all about surrendering. So immediately you surrender and you observe, because the second you surrender, you observe at the same time. It's mutually inexclusive. They happen simultaneously. Surrender and observation happen simultaneously.
I love the idea of like the guy that comes to the Zen master and how like with Zen, so much of it seems to just pretzelify your brain or point to the ineffable. And like, you know, I think it was Alan Watts saying, like, the guy comes before him, he's like, I'm suffering, you know, it's like, well, don't think about it. And it's like, I can't, I will try to not think about it. I can't, we'll try to not think about, and the idea of Zen pointing out the absurdity of it, you know, because what you're saying, like resistance, the only thing you can do is let go. The only thing that can happen to give you that relief when it's not being satiated by distraction, like, oh, you know, I went out and like did some kind of behavior to get my mind off it. Now I got to deal with the karma of that. The only way to not do that is to let go. Like, just let go of the whole thing. Let it go. And that is easier said than done, I think, sometimes, especially when it comes to egos. They don't know how. They only know how to think more about it.
It is easier. But you know, when you realize that, when you suffer enough and you realize the futility of the effort, then you just give up, because you realize that it has no use. You know, that goes back to the suffering thing.
Yeah. Well, Leif, I just want to say thanks for reaching out. It was great to have you come on.
Guys, it was really nice to meet you. Thank you.
That was really nice.
Same to you.
Take care, man.